There are certain mistakes that are commonly made in mathematical literacy exams and assessments, and it's really important for us as educators that we know how to guide the learners to prevent them from making these same mistakes over and over again. Now, the first common mistake that many learners make is not demonstrating a level of understanding. Where the learners often struggle is they often don't read the question properly. They often don't identify what sort of answer is required, and often they're not familiar with the vital terminology, or they're not able to interpret keywords such as of or from. Their low literacy level often hinders them in understanding the actual question. Let's have a look at an example. Now, this example was a sub-question under a table of data. Mr. August flew from Cape Town to Johannesburg along with 37 other passengers. What they struggle to understand in this question, and they get put off by the 37 other passengers, they fail to understand that there were more than 37 passengers. In the next example, the learners struggled with the wording of the question. They chose a dog with a litter of 7 females as their answer, rather than the correct answer, which was the dog that had a litter that had 7 more female dogs than male dogs. Now, how do we help our learners overcome these issues? The first is emphasize the importance of both factual knowledge and the application of this knowledge to scenarios and examples. Nextly, discourage the regurgitation of facts. Make sure they actually apply what they learn. We need to expose our learners to a variety of different questions and coach them on the approach to the different questions. And most importantly, we need to provide the learners with a list of keywords and explain to them what each of these words mean. And this list of words can be found on the PDF attached after this video clip. You're welcome to download this, print it, and give it to your learners. The next common mistake is where learners are not able to do the calculations and the formulae. They struggle to familiarize themselves with general formulae. They also don't know how to use the calculator properly, and some actually depend on their calculator too much. Learners struggle to substitute values into formulae. This example shows where learners were required to substitute values, and many of them substituted incorrectly. Now, how can we help our learners? Learners should be familiar with all the formulae and the relevant steps to complete the formulae. We need to provide the learners with a list of these formulae so they can learn it before the exam and assessments. Practice should be given to the learners to apply the formulae into different situations and appropriate situations. And I think most importantly, we need to emphasize the marks that they could lose unnecessarily if they're not confident with their formula and calculations. We need to make sure that learners know how to use their calculators correctly and give them enough practice with using them. Constantly remind learners that they mustn't change the formulae because that's going to lose them marks in the final answer. The third common mistake is that learners are not able to draw and interpret graphs. Learners don't acquire the basic graph reading skills. They also struggle to understand the different elements of the graph, and they don't always know how to interpret the scale of the graph accurately. They also don't always know how to represent data in a graphical format. Now, if we have a look at the example that's on your screen now, they're required to draw a line graph on the above table representing June's plan for the race. Many learners struggle to answer these questions. Some of the learners put points that aren't accurate, and therefore their shape of their graph is not correct. Or some learners draw a bar graph instead of a line graph. We need to ensure that we guide these learners to overcome these issues. How do we do this? We can try and include more real-life examples of graphs, especially from newspapers and media. So while we're teaching, we're showing them all the time, and they're getting used to what graphs look like. Make sure we consolidate the different types of graphs. Make sure they understand how they look and that they've got different purposes. Give the learners a mark allocation so that they know where they're losing their marks. Often they don't know or realize how many marks they lose for silly mistakes. Remind the learners that not each graph needs to be joined by a ruler. The fourth common mistake is that learners are not able to distinguish between content. Often learners give irrelevant content in an answer, And often learners confuse concepts and terminology. Have a look at this example. Learners are still unfamiliar with mathematical terminology and substituted in the radius of 30 centimeters. They halved the amount because some of the learners assumed the radius was the diameter. In this next example, learners struggled with the basics. They didn't know how to round off money to cents. And the third example, and this is a common error we see all the time, is the learners, in order to do this, come up with the correct answer. They need to know the BODMATs, and many of them don't know the basics. How do we help our learners? We need to emphasize the importance of understanding the formulae and not just learning them off by heart. We need to provide suitable examples in class of difficult concepts so that learners are easily able to distinguish between terminology and vocabulary used. We need to assist the learners to memorize the different conversion scales in the metric system and avoid losing unnecessary marks. And make sure we go back to the basics, consolidate the concepts taught in previous grades, such as BODMATs and rounding off. By being aware of these common mistakes, and where possible guiding our learners to help them where they struggle, there's no doubt that their final exam results should improve.